This is a training for the PA 509 Eastern Pennsylvania Continuum of Care. This is a core entry training focused on the fielding the housing assessment tool. And this is a new part of core entry for the Eastern PA CoC and our Connect to Home core entry system. The learning objectives for today's training, to learn the 5 Ws of the new housing assessment tool, which is replacing the VI SPDAT that we have been using since the inception of coordinate entry in 2017. The second objective, how specialists should complete or update the new housing assessment tool as part of a newly updated Connect to Home Eastern PA workflow in HMIS. So the hat is part of the workflow for households that are literally homeless by HUD category 1 or 4 definition, and it will still lead to placement on the by name list and referrals to emergency services as needed. The third learning objective is to understand policies and procedures related to use of the new hat, and finally, resources for using the hat effectively and getting additional training and technical assistance as needed. The 5 Ws of the housing assessment tool are as follows. Who is using this tool? Our core entry specialists, both in our 211 call center, as well as our access sites, our walk-in and by appointment access locations throughout the Eastern Pennsylvania continuum of care, will be using the hat for any household that meets the HUD category 1 or 4 definition of homelessness. What is the hat? The hat or housing assessment tool is our new standardized 12-question tool. And 7 of those 12 questions will be answered and scored from universal data elements, which is a HUD phrase, which are required questions that we've always asked as part of core entry intake. And Client Track will be able to automatically score those 7 points if awarded based on answering the answers to those required questions. So for the first time, core entry specialists will not have to re-ask similar questions like we used to when we had the VI SPDAT. There are only 5 questions that specialists will actually be asking, and these questions address significant barriers to permanent housing stability and vulnerabilities to the worst aspects of homelessness, and the answers are self-reported. So we're taking the answers that heads of household give us, whether it's a virtual phone intake or an access site in-person intake, and we'll be recording those answers, and that is how the other 5 points of the 12-point scoring tool will be answered and scored. Where is the hat fielded? It's fielded again identically by call center and access specialists, and it's part of the workflow in PAHMIS. When is the hat fielded? The hat is fielded during core entry intake, and it may be updated if a head of household contacts core entry again to provide an update to their current living situation. Why are we adopting the hat and replacing the VI SPDAT? The answer is that every continuum of care around the country is required to have a coordinate entry assessment tool. When resources are limited and the demand for homeless services outweighs the amount of services available, and that's true in every community around the country, that HUD requires us to use an assessment tool, and that assessment tool is fielded to all populations in an equitable way. So why we're adopting the hat is that it is a much shorter, a much more trauma-informed tool, and it's our tool. This, unlike some communities, we're replacing the VI SPDAT with something we've built from the ground up. Many of you may have been involved in the process of developing the hat. All of the major committees and the board of the CoC were engaged in the process. All CoC members and people with lived experience and expertise were given the opportunity to provide input through online surveys and other forums. And so this is our tool. And this is what we believe will help prioritize the most vulnerable residents and neighbors that are experiencing homelessness throughout our 33 county network in eastern Pennsylvania. So the visual display of the hat, just you're going to see a live training in just a moment. But there's two sections to the hat, as I referenced. Section one, these questions are auto-populated, scoring answers of yes or no. And there's 1 point per question. They're all 1 point. So a total of 12 possible points will be the total possible score from the hat. You do not, as CE specialists, need to ask these questions. These are simply part of displaying the total score and what are the answers that led to that total score. So these answers will be auto-populated for you based on earlier questions you've already asked in the intake process, and you will not be asking these again. You may want to take a look at the answers to make sure they're accurate, and there is a comment box where you can identify any concerns you have that the scoring was not auto-populating correctly. But currently, we've tested it broadly in training, and it is working as promised. So there's a possible total score of 7 on section one. But you and the head of household that you're working with will go right to section two, and you'll be asking these 5 questions that you'll again see in the live training in just a minute. The first question, has your current living situation made it difficult for any school-age children in your household to attend and do well in school? All of these questions have the same possible answer choices: yes, no, client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, data not collected. Our goal is to have yes or no for all of these questions, but as you'll see in our policies and procedures, as has always been the case, the client may refuse to answer any question. But that is the first question, and we intend specialists to ask these questions as written, and we will provide guidance if there are situations where you're being asked, well, what do you mean by that? And that could happen in the second question. Is your current experience of homelessness the result in whole or in part due to discrimination? And this is a yes, no question. So what may happen is the person might say, yes, I feel like I've been discriminated against because of how many people are in my family, or I've been discriminated against because of my race, or ethnicity or gender. If that is self-disclosed by the head of household, we would like you to record what kind of discrimination was disclosed using these optional checkboxes, which will only populate if the head of household has already answered yes. But you are not required, and they are not required to specify what kind of discrimination they've experienced. The purpose of asking this question is for us to gather data on what barriers based on discrimination are people experiencing in our CoC, so that the CoC can develop strategies to help reduce or eliminate those barriers and reduce the inequities that exist in our community. So, taking it together, please, you ask the question, is your current experience of homelessness the result in whole or in part due to discrimination? But you do not have to ask them, well, what kind, if they say yes. If they volunteer that information, please record it for our planning purposes. But simply answering yes is enough. And if they say, well, what do you mean by discrimination? What kinds of discrimination? You can prompt by scrolling through, reading the selections from the list, but you are not required to do that. The third of 5 questions you'll be asking is your current experience of homelessness the result in whole or in part due to criminal background or justice system involvement? And this question follows the same pattern as the previous question. We accept a simple yes, but if in part of answering that question, the head of household either says, yes, I have a felony conviction, or yes, I'm on probation, we would like you to check these optional boxes. But again, it's just for data and planning purposes. You're not required to ask what specifically kind of involvement they've had, and they are absolutely not should not be asked to disclose that if they haven't done it on their own volition. If again they ask, well, what do you mean by justice system involvement? You can read through these answers as examples, but they are not required to specify what sort of involvement they've had. We accept a simple yes, because again, this is self-reporting and we're accepting that self-reporting answer as accurate and truthful. The fourth question, have you been evicted from a housing unit in the past 7 years? Is a yes/no question. And the fifth question you'll be asking, since becoming homeless, has anyone in your household been engaged in dangerous or illegal activities? Is a simple yes/no, I don't know, or I prefer not to answer question, as they all are. So we're asking CE specialists during the housing assessment tool just to ask the 5 questions in section 2, to record any disclosure made around kinds of discrimination or kinds of criminal background or justice system involvement, but those are purely optional. And CE specialists should not ask people to specify, if they say yes to these 2 questions, what exactly did you experience? We're only recording data if it's volunteered, and it's only for planning purposes and does not affect score or prioritization at all. So there are a total of 5 possible points that come from section 2. And what you'll see in the hat section of the intake is then an auto-populated total score. That total score will be anywhere from 0 to 12. If there are any comments that you feel would be important for coordinated entry regional managers, for case conferencing or by name list purposes, or other housing providers to know about, you optionally can add comments in this dialog box. For example, if the head of household just disclosed something that may be relevant to what housing solution would best fit their own needs and their own goals. You can add those comments, but you are not required to put any comments in here. If it's something critical in your mind to by name list placement and referral to housing and case conferencing, then in addition, we'd still like CE specialists to create a CE intake note, just as you're doing today. So when in doubt, uh, add comments here, but always add a CE intake note if you feel that there's information that is necessary for others to know, particularly our regional managers. If you are updating a housing assessment tool for a household that already has received it, and we'll also show you how to do that in the training, this second box is for those update comments. So if there's a change in the household composition, if there's a change in the answer to any of those questions in sections 1 or 2 of the hat, resulting in a total score change, we would like you to point that out for us in the update section so that we know the score changed because a dependent child who had a disabling condition is no longer enrolled with the household. Or the current living situation has changed as part of updating a core entry intake, and now the household has met chronic definition and has a point there. So just place update comments here, and again, use your discretion, but if it's important to case conferencing or by name list housing referral, please make sure you also add a CE intake note as normal. There are a handful of important policies and procedures that are related to implementation of the hat, and I'm going to walk through these. These will be in an updated core entry policy manual. They will also be updated in our written standards manual as appropriate, but I'm just going to highlight these major policy changes related to the hat. First of all, the hat is going into production on November 13th, 2024. It will replace all of the VI SPDAT assessment tools. There is only one hat for any household. We no longer will have 3 separate tools. The scoring points have been factored into that. And you can see that reflected in sections 1 and 2 in terms of the needs of families and transition age youth, heads of household in particular. And so the hat will be the only tool that anyone experiencing literal homelessness and going through core entry will be scored on. And households that already have a VI SPDAT score are still going to be eligible for by name list referrals to housing and emergency services. And so for a period of time, we will have some households on the by name list with a VI SPDAT score and others with a new HAT score. And the managers are prepared to take a look at some of the key answers in the VI SPDAT, some of the other pieces of the HAT and pieces of the core entry intake, and make good judgments around who should be the next prioritized household referred to a housing provider. So that's procedure 1. Procedure 2, any household that's enrolled in core entry today and only has a VI SPDAT score um, should be encouraged to contact core entry again and have a HAT score added to their core entry enrollment. So if they're and you'll see that whenever a household is contacting core entry again to update their current living situation, their family composition, or ask the status of their enrollment in core entry, they will be walked through the whole CE workflow by US specialists and given the hat. So we're hopeful that within 90 days of launch, the majority of households that are active on the by name list will have a hat score. And our aspiration is to make sure that everyone on the by name list has a hat score within the next really 3 to 6 months. Fielding the hat. The hat is intended as a brief trauma-informed assessment. It's based on the head of household self-reported answers to a combination of those HUD-required data elements questions that score Section 1 automatically, and those 5 locally CoC chosen questions that we just walked through from Section 2 that you will be asking heads of household during the intake or update process. And just as a reminder for everyone, the HAT score is not intended to be the only piece of information that prioritizes households for limited housing services. It's one important scoring tool piece of information, but we also look at everything else we know about the household through CE intake notes, through previous engagement with other housing programs in the CoC. So one's destiny in the core entry system is not solely based on the score as a result of the hat, but it is a really important component of that. So the related procedures, all specialists are required to field the hat during CE intake for HUD category 1 and 4 definition households. Number 2, you will see that the hat has been integrated into both the regular CE intake workflow for Cat 1.4 as well as the DV Anonymous workflow. It will function the same in both. Third, as has always been the case, participant households should never be told their HAT score. The HAT score, as I've just said, is not an accurate measure of their prioritization status. And because of the limited resources we have, it also is not a good way of explaining to people how long they might be waiting for housing services. So there's really no value in providing the score other than potentially making people feel like maybe they need to say yes to more questions to increase their score. And finally, as a reminder, participants may always choose to say, I don't want to answer this question in the hat in section 2. You would select client prefers not to answer. But the truth is that if they refuse to answer a question, it will reduce their total score, which will decrease their prioritization status on the by name list. So what happens when a household has an active core entry intake in Cat 1 or 4 project and has a HAT score and is now contacting core entry again because either their family composition has changed, meaning a family member needs to be added or removed from their household, specifically their project enrollment, and or their living situation has changed, which might impact their HAT answers. What needs to happen in terms of procedures in this situation is the following. Number one, if the head of household is contacting a core entry specialist already enrolled, wants to change any of their answers to their HAT score, or wants to share with you any changes to their living situation, you will always edit the CE intake workflow that already exists. You will not do any updating of the hat, for example, outside of the workflow. So you'll always be updating, for example, section two, someone wants to change their answer because they've recently had a justice system involvement or they thought about it, and they do feel that they are the victim of some sort of discrimination. You will edit the hat from within the existing CE workflow. You will not create a new hat. And as you'll see, every household enrolled in core entry will always have one and only one hat. It'll always be an updated hat. There'll never be a second hat or a third hat. You'll see that we are no longer going to have a time window that says if it's been more than 90 days, do a new VI SPDAT. That's our current procedure. That procedure is gone. There will always be one continually updated hat per active enrollment. If a household is exited from court entry because we've either lost touch with them after 90 days or they've been enrolled into a housing program like rapid rehousing, but then 6 months, 12 months, 24 months later, they find themselves category one homeless again and are getting a completely new CE intake, then that only in that situation will they have a new hat. So per active CE project enrollment, every household will have one hat and it will simply be updated in the workflow when necessary. Number two, and really these pretty much follow our current procedures, but we wanted to spell them out and train on them here. If the head of household changes, if the head of household leaves the family, but the rest of the family remains category one, literally homeless, and wants to remain enrolled in core entry and on the by name list, but will have a new head of household, and it's likely to be that new head of household contacting core entry again to update their client record. What needs to happen is if the head of household changes, the entire household should be exited from coordinated entry enrollment, dated the day of this new contact, which is usually, let's say, today. And then a new core entry enrollment will be created with that new head of household as the head of household, also dated today. It's completely acceptable to exit a core entry project and enter a new one on the same date. And all of the remaining household members that want to be part of that enrollment will also be enrolled in that new assessment. So what we will then have is a new core entry. We will have an exited core entry assessment for the old head of household and household members, and a brand new enrollment with a brand new hat based on the answers provided by the new head of household starting on the same day. If, and then procedure number three, which also is not brand new, but just to clarify, if a household splits into two or more households with two or more heads of household, and one part of that household has the existing head of household, only the member staying with that head of household will stay in that enrollment. All of the other household members that are still literally Cat 1 homeless but want to be in a new household, for example, if there's a family separation, then they will be exited from the current enrollment and entered into a brand new core entry enrollment with a new head of household. Again, effective date can be the same date, exit and entry into a new CE enrollment. And with the new head of household, we'll have a new intake and a new housing assessment tool. If, as you're doing this work, you have questions and you're faced with the situation described in these procedures and you're not sure what to do, you can always turn to your supervisor or a core entry regional manager or submit a help ticket in PAHMIS and explain the exact situation and reference the specific client IDs. The next hat policy, if a household enrolled in core entry is no longer eligible under HUD Category 1 definition of homelessness, what does the CE specialist do? This is an update of our existing policy, so I want to walk through this carefully and make sure that everyone understands it. Because HUD requires core entry specialists to document every contact with a head of household currently enrolled in coordinated entry, if upon contacting us to provide an update or to ask for an update, the head of household discloses that their current living situation has changed since project enrollment, continue to do what we've always done, which is add a CE intake note and send an email notification to the appropriate regional manager explaining the change in living situation. If the living situation no longer is one of the following that you'll see listed here that are part of the HUD Category 1 definition, meaning they're no longer living and sleeping outside or in a place not meant for human habitation, or they're no longer staying in an emergency shelter, or they're no longer staying in a hotel or motel paid for by a charitable organization or government program, or they're no longer exiting an institution and they were in which they were homeless before upon entry and stayed for no more than 90 days, or they are no longer fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. If they no longer meet one of those eligible Category 1 criteria, then they need to be exited from the Category 1 project enrollment. Again, this is not new. This has always been our practice. But what is a nuance is the following. It's that last paragraph, which is that if they're currently enrolled, they contact a core entry specialist for an update. And they state that, last night I actually got to stay with my aunt in her house. As long as they have been in a Category 1 eligible living situation at least once in the past 7 nights, we will not exit them from the core entry enrollment. This is more recent HUD guidance to account for the fact that again, it only applies to people that already met the Category 1 definition when the core entry project enrollment was created, and now they're contacting us again, and now they happen to mention that once or twice or more in the last 7 nights they still were literally homeless in one of these Category 1 situations, then that is no longer a reason to exit them immediately from the enrollment. If they say, for it's been over a week and I've been living with friends or family, that changes things. Then they're no longer Cat 1 eligible, and you would exit them from the Cat 1 enrollment. You would add the CE intake note explaining why. And yes, they might actually now be eligible for Cat 2. They might have found an apartment or they are living with someone, but they've got to pay some rent. They may qualify if they qualify for Category 2, which is imminent risk of homelessness per the HUD definition in our policy manual written standards. You may exit them from Category 1 that day and enroll them in our Category 2 program that same day. Again, any questions about this can be addressed in future CE office hours. You can email me, you can email a regional manager, or you can submit a help ticket if you need guidance on this. But this is just a clarification of our existing policy. There are two small notes related to the hat that you will see in HMIS next week, as well as you will receive by email. One is that all core entry specialists are supposed to be following our opening conversation. This happens before PAHMIS client record search or creation or update, but it's our opening script. And if you're a CE specialist working in an access site and you've never seen this before, I encourage you to request a copy of this. It's in our CE specialist toolkit, and it will be posted by Tuesday at the link here, which is our main core entry webpage. But it's really the guide for how to lead the beginning of a core entry intake and what to do based on the responses that you're getting. So this is what we used to call our pre-screen. It's our opening conversation. It helps us determine whether a household is category 1 or 4 homeless, and if they are category 1 or 4, what to do next. In terms of category 1, you would move into the CE intake. In terms of category 4, you would offer safety planning and a warm handoff to a domestic violence hotline. If that's not requested or refused, then you would move forward with a Cat 4 enrollment and offer the DV Anonymous intake or the regular public intake. Nothing's changed here, with one minor exception, which is under number 4. We've removed in reference to the VI SPDAT. There was one reference to the VI SPDAT that's no longer relevant. Otherwise, the opening conversation has not changed, but please use the updated version, updated November 13th, 2024. Once you use that opening conversation, you are then prepared to potentially enroll people into one of our 2 core entry projects, or provide them other resources, or unfortunately may let them know that they're not eligible for our resources. There is one other hat related update that will be in production at the same time that the hat is on November 13th. This actually has nothing to do with the hat, but we decided to time its release with the hat to cover it in this training. And that is the addition of one required triage assessment question, which reads as follows. Do you or another household member currently receive Medicaid benefits from the state of Pennsylvania? This question is being added because the CoC is planning for the future, and beginning in 2025, will likely be partnering with Medicaid providers statewide who are able to offer additional housing-related services or benefits to their Medicaid enrolled members. And as a planning step, we need to better understand how many of the households experiencing literal homelessness in the Eastern PA region have Medicaid. And so you'll ask this question. If prompted, this is a standard explanation of what Medicaid is. But most likely, people are either going to know. The most likely answers are yes, I'm a Medicaid beneficiary, no, or I don't know. And we will offer additional training and guidance to specialists on Medicaid and how to help people answer that question correctly. But we are going to have this question, a required question, in the triage assessment beginning on November 13th. Where do you go for additional hat resources? The best place to start is our core entry web page. We've actually built out an entire web section of several pages over the last few months that have a number of downloadable resources for CE specialists and CE partners. This training and other trainings are available on our YouTube channel. You can always submit a PA-HMIS help ticket for technical issues. In other words, you're doing a CE intake in HMIS or updating one, and something's going wrong technically, or you're not sure how to answer a question. You can submit a help ticket directly in HMIS. You can join our monthly office hours, and in fact, we've moved up November's office hours to the day after the hat rollout so that we can answer immediate questions from CE specialists. That'll be November 14th at 8:30 a.m. And if you're not on our mailing list and you'd like to join, please send me an email. And finally, if you'd like to understand the bigger picture context of why we do coordinated entry and how we do it, I'd encourage you to take a look at the HUD official core entry core elements guidebook. Some resources you may not know about additionally are that whenever you log into PAHMIS, and if you do log in through Connect to Home, you will see a dedicated news page if you just click on My Client Track, and it's part of the home screen. And so we're going to get better at providing news updates on that. But that's a kind of a live news page that's part of the front welcoming screen into PAHMIS. There's also PAHMIS news from our administrative team as well. You may not know that also in my client track, if you go further down the submenus, there is a PAHMIS training submenu. And those first two submenus are actually really helpful. We post all of our training video recordings right there, and you can click through in HMIS and launch YouTube in your web browser and watch those videos. There are some specific to core entry and others that are general for all HMIS users. And I'm highlighting the PHMIS reading material section because you can actually filter that by all HMIS users, all Eastern CoC users, and specifically for us, coordinate entry specialists, and scroll down and actually download materials. In fact, this slide deck is already posted there, and if you logged in right now after the training or when you watch this training, you'll be able to download the slide deck right from HMIS, as well as that opening conversation that I just shared with you a few slides back. The last thing we'd like you to do, and I'm going to transition into a live demonstration of the hat, is when you have completed this training, either participating live on November 8th or live on November 12th, or watched the video recording posted, or participated in a 211 dedicated call center training that's happening outside of this by the 211 team just for 211 call center specialists. We'd like you to complete a very brief training form so that we know who has completed the hat training. And there's also an optional opportunity to post share any other questions or comments you have that would help you feel more confident in fielding the hat in the future. I am going to transition to the second part of which is the live training demo. I hope you are continuing to or have been if you would like to post your questions in the chat, and there will still be time in the remainder once I've gone through this live demonstration to have those questions answered. I am going to use the training environment. The You should be able to see my screen in the training environment. I've already created a family to save some time, but I'm going to go through the entire core entry enrollment for this family that includes the new hat and includes the new Medicaid question. So it's available through the core entry submenu as always. It'll be called Eastern CoC CE Intake. I already have the head of households client record up, so I saved that search step and I didn't have to create the new client, but this is the head of household Reed Richards, and this is going to be a non-DV anonymous intake using the current client as the head of household. You can see that nothing's changed here, but as an example of how section 1 of the hat auto-populates, the veteran status question, if the answer were yes, the household would automatically get a scoring point in section 1 for having a veteran member of the household. But nothing has changed on this screen. It's just information that gets pulled into the hat automatically. You can see that there are 4 family members. They'll all be enrolled in this core entry project. This is really identical to what we have in production today. But I would note, and I hope my screen follows, that you will see that in order to score the hat properly, we do need to know if any adult member of the let me rephrase. If any member of the household is pregnant, and so you will be asking the pregnancy status question to all household members as appropriate. And if the answer is yes, you'll be requested, and you can see there is one member here that is yes. It'll then prompt you for the due date. And again, the client has the right not to answer for this person, but if they know the due date, that's helpful for our records. And so some of the answers here, for example, veteran status of any household member, pregnancy status of any household member, and age of the head of household will all factor into their section one scoring points for the hat. So all the family members are enrolled. They're going to be enrolled in our Cat 1-4 project. It defaults to that project, and we're going to select and make sure that all four members are part of this enrollment. And again, I'm only skipping the parts where I've already created these all four members. So under the universal data assessment, disabling condition, again, this would affect their score. This will help us, these questions, as always, help us calculate chronic status, as well as establish the background of um, homelessness history. So nothing's changed here. Again, just some of these will impact the section one scoring. Here's our domestic violence assessment that was introduced a few months ago. If they are currently fleeing, they will receive the scoring point for currently fleeing. As always, you will not be asking this question again because it should have already been asked in the opening conversation as part of safety planning and possible referral to a domestic violence hotline. But if they are going through the workflow, then you would want to record the same answer as currently fleeing if they've disclosed that they are a survivor and are currently fleeing. If translation assistance is needed, you would, again, nothing's changed here. You would select whatever that language is needed to be. And then you would get the triage assessment, and you will see that the only change to our triage assessment is this Medicaid question. Do you or another household member currently receive Medicaid benefits from the state of Pennsylvania? Nothing else has changed here. As always, it's important to know where people are in the CoC and where they are willing to live, and if necessary, what their bedroom needs are, which is required in our DV Anonymous workflow. Now moving to the other household members, and again, the disabling condition a yes to disabling condition can potentially impact um, their hat score, their new hat score. I'm more concerned here with recording answers than I am with making sure they're identical among all of the household members. Actually, you don't have to fill that out. Nothing here has changed. Going through all the household members. Note for demonstration purposes that this household member is the one who is currently pregnant. And there is a scoring point for that in section one of the hat. If this member leaves the house, if Janatha leaves the household, then we'll show you how to I'll show you how to remove that household member from the enrollment and update the hat score so that it will reflect the fact that there's no longer someone with that status. So there used to be a screen that read, "Would you like to complete a VI SPDAT?" and there were options. This is simply housing assessment tool, complete or update housing assessment tool. If you're doing a new intake, the answer is yes. If you're updating a current intake, the answer is yes. So you're essentially always going to be clicking yes. And what you will see is this is what the housing assessment tool looks like. It auto-populates information that we already know and is simply asking you, again, is this an in-person or a phone intake? All of the client information was pulled from the head of household basic client information. It's just here for display purposes. You can't even edit it. It's just to help you as a reference. Section one is auto-populated answers from previous. You can see there is a household member that's pregnant. There is a household member, at least one that's a veteran. There is a household member that's living in a place not meant for habitation. There is a household member fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence or human trafficking. And so there's a total section one score of 4 out of 7. You will not be able to edit these. But if you see a problem, please make a comment and submit an email to your regional manager or your supervisor and submit a help ticket in HMIS. But these should always be accurate. And again, as a reminder, you're not asking the head of household these 7 questions in section one. You're just checking it to make sure it's accurate based on answers they've already given you. You can go right to section two in your conversation with the head of household, and you will now ask these 5 questions. Has your current living situation made it difficult for any school-age children in your household to attend and do well in school? Is your current experience of homelessness the result in whole or in part to discrimination? Let's say yes. And they happen to mention that it's because they have 5 pets. You would just check that for information purposes, but you would not ask them to disclose what kind of discrimination if they have not self-disclosed that to you. They get the point simply for saying yes. Is your current experience of homelessness the result in whole or in part due to criminal background or justice system involvement? Yes. And I don't want to, the client doesn't say anything about it, just says yes. You check client prefers not to answer. If they had said, well, I'm on probation, you could check probation, but again, it's just for data collection purposes. You are not required, and they are not required to answer what kind. Uh, what have you been evicted from a housing unit in the past 7 years? Since becoming homeless, has anyone in your household been engaged in dangerous or illegal activities? The client prefers not to answer. They have a total subsection total of 3. 4 plus 3 is 7. Their total score is auto-calculated. You could add comments here if anything additionally valuable was shared with you that could be helpful for case conferencing and referral to housing. And if you are, instead of doing a new hat, updating a current hat, you would add any update comments here about what's changed. For example, the head of household called back or walked in again and said, you know what, I forgot I was evicted 5 years ago. And you might change that answer from no to yes, and you would note and update exactly that. Um, you would hit save. It's defaulted to placed on prioritization list. That's grayed out. You do not have to ask that. But when you hit save, the housing assessment is complete and the intake is complete. So you would finish the workflow. And when you click finish workflow, you will get taken right directly to the referral page so that if necessary, you can add referrals as normal to, for example, emergency shelter. Where does the hat live if you ever want to look at a current head of household hat score? It also lives under the core entry submenu under housing assessment tool. If you click that, you will see who did the intake. That's me. You will see their section score breakdown, their total score. You will hover over that sticky note, and you can see that the comments and updates actually appear without clicking anything. And there's the little more detail if you hover over the question mark around this. But you should never be doing anything else here other than if you're interested in making sure it was done right, or who conducted the hat, or what the total score is. You can just use this submenu item as a reference. So, what would happen if the head of household contacted us again and said one of the household members is no longer with us with the family. They've left, and we want to up. I want to update. I want to let you know that. So in that case, as we've discussed, you will go back to the active enrollment. You will see for the you will see this on November 13th that this ellipsis menu, the three dot menu, when you click on it, actually has been reorganized and cleaned up a little into different sections. And this is a unique ellipsis menu for people logged into Connect to Home doing coordinate entry. But the most important two things here, are really three things here, are one, if you're going to update a current enrollment, including a current hat, you will use Edit CE Client Intake Workflow. You will go through the entire workflow. That's if the head of household contacts you and says, I've changes to my living situation, or I want to change my answer to a hat question. If the head of household or any household member is being exited from the core entry enrollment, you will select this new under exit menu, exit Eastern PACE. You will always use this to exit a household member from an enrollment, whether it's the head of household or any family member. So those are probably the two most important things. So in this case, the head of household contacts us and says that Jonatha Storm is no longer in the household and should be removed from the enrollment. What do? You go directly to that household member who's exiting, and you use this new menu to exit them from the project enrollment using Exit Eastern PACE. And this is what it will look like. You'll be asked if they know the exit destination. Great. They're going to go stay with friends permanently. That's all you have to add there. If you don't know, you say other or don't know. This is just a confirmation of information that we already had, so you can just hit save. You are going to continue to be asked, well, what is their current living situation before going to move in permanently with friends or family? And that hasn't changed. They were in a place not meant for human habitation when they were enrolled in CE. So that would be their living situation right now. This is HUD required. Don't know why we're having to answer it twice, but we are. We're not exiting any other family members, but we're going to be prompted. If you exit one family member from the CE enrollment, you'll be prompted if you want to exit any others. So we want to say no to all the others in this situation. The other three family members remain enrolled. Would you like to reassess the HAT score for the remaining household members? Yes. This is how the PAHMIS is going to figure out that Jonatha Storm exited the enrollment on 11/8 and is going to recalculate the HAT score by taking out any points that were awarded because of Jonatha's enrollment. So you would hit save. You will at this time have to, this is meant to double check the answers. These are all grayed out. There's nothing you can change here. You're just going to hit save. You're going to get a page for all the remaining family members. You're going to just save them. You don't even have to double check them. Um, at some point, that'll be automated and you won't even see those or have to flow through those. But for now, we haven't been able to finish coding that yet. So now you'll arrive you'll at the head of households updated HAT score, and you will see that is any household member pregnant? No, because Jonatha was the pregnant household member who's been exited from the enrollment, and that has taken away that scoring point automatically. If the head of household has also told you that any answers have changed in section 2, you could update those, but most likely they are the same. You do not have to re-ask these questions during an update or check-in, but you would at this point say, this member on 11/8, and now we understand what has changed. So you hit save, you finish the workflow, and you return to the head of household's dashboard. It's really important that you always update the CE intake workflow from the head of household and not another family member. But if you are removing a family member, you go to that family member, exit them, and the rest of this update process can flow from there. Adding family members has not changed. I'm not going to go through that in this training, but adding family members may impact the HAT score, but and essentially works the same way. You will add the family member, you'll finish editing the CE intake workflow, you'll be asked to update the HAT, yes or no, you'll hit yes. And if the HAT score changes as a result of the new family members' answers, it will be reflected in their HAT. And then when you go back to the housing assessment tool, you will see that the display shows that the HAT score has changed to 6. And the reason why was that on 11/8, Jonatha exited from enrollment. Ideally, I would have also said that was the pregnant household member, but that I should have done that. But that's an example of how to do that work. That is the end of the live demonstration of using the core entry intake with the HAT tool. Again, please reference the resources that are in the slide deck that accompanies this training if you have additional questions on how to field the housing assessment tool in HMIS.